Temples in India are diverse. They range from mammoth marvels to small roadside shrines. They are stunning symbols of not only faith and religion, but are a living source of the evolution of Indian architecture and advances in building technology through the ages. Hi, I'm Sneha Gupta and welcome to our show. In this episode of Building Blocks of Bharat, we will explore three styles of temple buildings and complexes. The spectacular Brihadeswar temple in Tanjavur that epitomize the Dravida or South Indian style of temple building. The stunning Khajuraho Temple Complex that showcases the Nagara or North Indian style of building. And last, Hampi complex in Karnataka, which is synthesizes of two styles. All these are World Heritage Sites.
It is believed that through the Vedic period in India, most worship was centered around a fire. After this came simple structures made of stone and wood. This was followed by cave temples, common in many mountainous terrains. So temples evolved from these simple origins to more intricate structures that showed a deep mastery of natural resources, advance of technology, engineering and aesthetics. But as society advanced, temples became places of education, social gatherings, festivities and marriages. And eventually, they became the nucleus of ancient cities. Markets flourished around them. Palaces and military garrisons were situated close to them. In the post-Vedic period, temple style can be classified into two broad categories: the North Indian style called the Nagara and the South Indian style called the Dravidian. While there are many differences in the two styles, Nagara or North Indian temples have a curvy linear tower. Nagara-style temple architecture originated during the Gupta period between 320 and 650 AD and is found mostly in North and Central India. The Dravidian or the South Indian temples, on the other hand, have a truncated pyramidal structure. The Southern-style Dravidian temple have their genesis during the age of the Pallavas of Kanchipuram between 600 and 850 AD and later dweller by the Chalukya of Badami and Pandya of Madurai. A third style of temple architecture, which is an amalgam between the Nagara style and the Dravidian style, is the Vesara style temples. These were also influenced by the Buddhist apsidal chapels and evolved during the period of later Chalukyas. Let us start our exploration from the Brihadeswar temple in Tanjavur in the state of Tamil Nadu. This imposing structure was built by Raja Cholan and his sister Kundavai, both ardent devotees of Lord Shiv. It was inaugurated by the king himself in 1019 CE. The Cholas were great temple builders and built about 300 temples from their power base in the Kaveri Delta region of central Tamil Nadu. But the greatest temple they built in terms of the monumentality of conception, architectural grandeur and powerful sculpture is the Brihadeswar temple at Tanjavur. The design of this temple was powered by the Vastu Shastra, the science of ancient construction. It was built in the Dravid style of architecture, characterized by the stepped pyramidal form of the main tower. When the Brihadeswar temple was completed in 1003 CE, it was the tallest temple in India. 1,000 years later, standing at 65.84 meters, it is still the tallest temple in India. The temple's layout is set within a large rectangular enclosure, measuring 241 by 121 meters, which is close to a perfectly proportioned double square. It is interesting to note that this huge enclosure is aligned on an east-west axis. The 18-degree deviation south from exact east may be explained by the careful alignment of the temple with the rising sun on the day of the temple's foundation. As is typical of Dravida temple architecture, the entry is through two monumental pyramidal gateways or gopuras. The entrance of the temple is dominated by a Nandi statue which measures 4.87 meters in height and 3.9 meters in width. At the exact center of the rear square of the enclosure is placed the monumental tower of Viman that rises above the main shrine containing the massive ling of Shiv. The Viman is slightly under 60 meters in height, almost exactly half the courtyard's width, further demonstrating the precision with which this temple was built. The tower, like much of the temple, is of interlocking stones without any binding material like cement. Such highly developed building technology is amazingly advanced for the time. The tower is shaped like a pyramid with a square base. It is raised on a monumental base with a two-story wall supporting the sweeping elevation of the 14 tiers of the superstructure. On the summit is the pot finial, stupi, installed in April 1010 that marked the consecration of the temple and the start of its ritual life. A capping stone whose weight is estimated to measure 81.3 tons tops the Viman. The question that then arises is, how did the Cholas lift 80 tons during those days when modern equipment was not available? The Viman is 60 meters high. Did they use cranes or some other method to lift the kumbham? One theory suggests that elephants were used to lift the stone. Maybe they were made to walk up a ramp. Another theory suggests that it was rolled up a circular ramp. Whatever the truth, it is truly an engineering marvel. Another interesting fact about the main temple is that it is entirely built of granite. What astounds historians and archaeologists is that there was not a single granite quarry in about 100 kilometers radius of the temple. This means that transporting these stones would have been a Herculean task. But Raja Cholan insisted on the use of these stones. It is estimated that more than 130,000 tons of granite was used to build the temple. Again, what were the techniques used to cut granite, one of the hardest stones, back in the 11th century AD? They did that using wooden wedges. Using blunt chisels, they drill adjacent holes on the rock and insert dry wooden wedges. The wedges are watered frequently. The expansion of soaked wedges would crack the rock upon repeated hammering. The temple was completed in just 7 years, which is a phenomenal feat. If we work out the math, it amounts to moving and placing almost 50 tons of rock each and every day, not to forget carving and then aligning it. Inscriptions in the temple point towards Kunjarmalan Rajaraja Peruntachan as the chief architect of the temple. His successors survive to this day and practice the art of Vastu or Vastu Shastra. Before we leave the temple, let us wander around and take in the stunning sculptures that adorn these walls. There are depictions of dancers showing 81 of 108 perfect poses in Bharatanatyam. There is also evidence that the temple were a platform for talented dancers to showcase their talent. In the 11th century, temples were being built on an unprecedented scale across India. But few temples can compare to such a monumental single-towered shrine like the one in Tanjavur. Our next stop takes us to the temples of Khajuraho in Madhya Pradesh, which epitomizes the Nagar or North Indian style of temple building. From the 13th century, the Khajuraho temples lay lost and forgotten, till a British Army captain, T.S. Burt, happened to chance upon them in the middle of the 19th century. And this led to the revival of these stunning monuments. There are three temple groups here: Western group, Eastern group, and the Southern group. But we are focusing on the Western group. Now, Khajuraho was one of the capitals of the Chandela kings, who from the 9th to the 11th century CE ruled almost all of what is now the state of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. The complex contains about 85 temples, but only 20 are still intact. It is believed that every Chandela ruler built at least one temple in his lifetime. Khajuraho is known for its erotic sculptures, but in reality, only 2% of the stunning sculptures in this complex are erotic. What truly stands out and has awed generations is the symmetry and the architectural brilliance and intricate carvings. The temples are both Jain and Hindu and were built using sandstone with varying shades of buff, pink, and pale yellow. Through the period of construction, the Chandela kings must have used thousands of sculptors, architects, and masons. These builders constructed the temples in this complex in the Nagar style of building.
The geographic land of India has several marks of faith spread all across its length and breadth. It's time to take a short break. We will be right back. Welcome back after the break. For centuries, temples have remained integral to the Indian society. As the nerve centers of Indian religious life, these temples came to wield enormous powers. The role of the temples did not remain confined to catering to the religious needs of men. They went on to dominate the socio-economic and political life of the community while proficiently contributing to the cultural and architectural heritage of the country. So let's begin our journey once again.
The Khajuraho complex has many groups of buildings. We'll focus on a few to see the building style. One of the biggest temples in the complex is the Kandarya Mahadev temple. The primary feature here and in many temples in this complex is a beehive-shaped central tower called the Shikhar, whose highest point is directly over the temple's primary deity. This is often surrounded by smaller subsidiary towers called Urushringa or intermediate towers. The way these are built naturally draws the eye up to the highest point. Setting the temple on a raised base, Adhishtan, also shifts the eye upward and promotes this vertical quality. One can actually see variations in the designs of the shikhar across various temples in this complex. When one looks at the plan of the building, it is based on a square. Often, however, the central shaft was surrounded by many smaller reproductions of itself, creating a spectacular visual effect resembling a fountain. All the compartments of the temple are interconnected both internally and externally along a single axis, usually running east to west. Every temple had the entrance porch called Ardhamandap, a hall or mandap, the vestibule or antaral, and the garbhagriha or sanctum. The plan was inevitably symmetrical both in the layout and the final structure. The kind of uniformity in temple design created almost a code that could be replicated across the region, and this incorporated a deep understanding of the science of design. The tower in the Nagara temples have decorative arches known as gavaksh. These are not true arches, in which parts of the arch hold up their own weight. The arches in Khajuraho's temple are made by a technique known as corbelling. This is done by letting successive stones overhang slightly. The steps produced by the corbelled construction are then hewn away to produce a smooth profile. The temple tower is topped by the amlak, a stone disc, usually with ridges on the rim, that sits atop the temple's main tower. According to one interpretation, the amlak represents a lotus and is a symbolic seat for the deity below. Another interpretation is that it symbolizes the sun and is thus the gateway to the heavenly world. The amlak itself is crowned with a kalash or finial, from which a temple banner is often hung. The other key elements in the building at the entrance porch include the Great Hall or the Mahamandap, the vestibule or antaral, which forms a transitional space between a temple's main hall and the inner sanctum, garbhagriha, where the image of the temple's primary deity would be housed. The water management systems worked into the design show a high scientific understanding. First, like many other temples, there are water bodies nearby. The current water bodies include Shiv Sagar, Prem Sagar, Khajur Sagar, also called Ninora Tal, and Khudar River. All the temples also have sophisticated drainage structures like spouts for water to drain off and tapered platforms. We could spend so much time exploring the myriad other details of this complex, but we want to explore one more temple. The stunning site of Hampi, along the banks of the Tungabhadra, is our last stop. This city was the capital of the Vijayanagar kingdom, which ruled from the 14th to the 16th century CE. This city is populated with 1,600 remains, including forts, temples, shrines, halls, stables, and water structures. This is a great example of how a temple was the central point of the city, surrounded by water bodies, markets, and living spaces. In fact, traditionally, many of these townships developed around the temples. Now, what Hampi has in abundance is rock. Millions upon millions of boulders shaped the geography of Hampi. The main stone used here was granite. It was a harder stone than usually used for temples. but this was the most abundant rock available on the site. It was also an economical option. So while the lower portions of the temples used granite, the upper portions often used terracotta. The temple complex has a concentric series of rectangular enclosure walls with gopuras, towered gateways in the middle of each wall, and the most important temple in the middle of this rectangle. The site also has large and small temples. Some of the main temples are the Virupaksh, the Krishna, the Achyutarya, and the Vithal temples. Large temples consist of a main shrine, a shrine for the goddess, mandaps for the performance of different ceremonies, all enclosed in a prakar or compound wall with a lofty gopura over the entrance. In the front of the gopura is seen a long chariot street running between 500 to 1000 meters. Flanked by mandaps on its right side, a temple tank. These streets served as markets and mandaps served as shops. The Hampi Bazaar, a long street of 32 meters wide and nearly 728 meters long, runs between Virupaksh temple and the foot of the Matang hill and was once lined with magnificent houses and beautiful mandaps. The Virupaksh temple rises majestically at the western end of the Hampi Bazaar. It is the oldest temple at Hampi and is believed to have been built in the 15th century and is dominated by its 50-meter tall Gopuram. The temples of this area are characterized by their massive dimensions, cloistered enclosures, and lofty towers over the entrances, encased by decorated pillars. It was the Vijayanagara kings who introduced the lofty Gopuras over the entrances, and they are popularly known as Raya Gopuras. The Garuda shrine in the form of a stone chariot is an excellent piece of art. Large monolithic sculptures like Narasimha, Ganesh and Veerbhadra are also found at the site.
So we could spend days drinking in the intricate structure in the temple, but it's time for us to leave. We leave remembering how these temples in ancient times were once social hubs where people congregated. They were also sites where the arts of dance, music and combat were honored and have been passed down for generations. But today, these temples remind us of our past and the architectural brilliance of the craftsmen of those times. So that's it for today. See you in next episode. Please share your views or suggestions on feedback@indiascience.in. Till then, goodbye.